Good morning. We are live today on Soup and Meatballs. Georgia and Georgia Tech may still be in overtime. The Chiefs win another close one, and the Bears lose more than just a game. But first, our top story today. Tim, today's the game. How are you feeling?
Which game are we talking about? Oh, the game. Yeah. I'm not feeling great about it.
How about that? Well, how are you feeling health-wise? I mean, apparently very thin right now.
I'm very full. A lot of leftovers. How are you feeling? Did you get your helping of stuffing?
Yeah. So I'm doing this. I'm doing the weight loss shot thing, and it totally destroyed Thanksgiving. Like I didn't overeat. I mean which is a good thing, but I had my regular plate, which I take a little bit of everything, just to say I did, and then I got a second helping of stuffing, and there was like 3 bites left that like my body's telling me don't eat this. And I didn't listen. I'm like, what am I going to do here? It's 3 bites. It required me to sit and like relax. I mean, I didn't get sick, but I was definitely overly full. And then I ended up taking a nap while the family was eating dessert. And I wasn't going to eat dessert anyway. I'm not a big pumpkin pie guy or pumpkin, but they do a lot of pumpkin stuff. And I woke up in the middle of like this weird activity where we had 20 people over at my in-laws' house. I woke up looking around and I sent you a text. It felt like I was Dr. Beckett from Quantum Leap. Like, right. What am I doing here? Who am I? And how do I figure out how do I get out of here?
I hate falling asleep in a room where there are other people. Like it's some sort of like family activity, like because it is very disorienting to wake up and have people like looking at you. Like, did I pass out? Is this a coma? What year is this?
Allegedly I snore too. So, but I was sitting up. So I think my snoring happens more when I'm laying down. Yeah, as a byproduct of whatever the cause of snoring is. But yeah, and then it was a good night. Then last night. So Thanksgiving was my father-in-law's birthday. Tough to celebrate your father-in-law's birthday on Thanksgiving, so we take him out to dinner last night at a local establishment, which struggled. I can tell you, we probably will not be back at this establishment, probably ever.
How bad was it?
So our reservation was at 6:30. Our food showed up at like 8:15. Ooh. And I mean, it's a fancy place, but so you get the long, drawn out experience. So there's 2 fancy places here in town, and I remember telling Jen, I said, remember some of the other dinners we had at this other place were long, like 2 hours. She's like, yeah, but there's like a constant sending of food. You get the initial food, then you get the bread, then you get your salad, and it's like there's not long of a wait. My brother-in-law got a pizza at this place, and he got his pizza, and the waiter's like, oh, no, everything else is coming right up. And it was a half an hour until the rest of our food showed up.
Don't tell me lies, waiter.
So like Derek ordered a steak and he ordered it medium, and it came out. It was Earl Grey, man. It was my father-in-law's steak was. You could just tell it was like under a heat lamp. And I don't know if the waiter just took a nap and didn't bring the food out. Like mine was okay. Like it wasn't special. So they felt bad about it. And like, you didn't, and my mother-in-law picked the restaurant. It's like, she felt bad because she picked. Well, it's not your fault. This place should have been good. It was the place Jen and I had our wedding reception. So you remember that place.
Yeah.
Food's it's not normally terrible, but yeah, they struggled last night. And like my stomach is kind of like reacclimating itself to, being normal today. So.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, you talk about that sensation of having like 2 or 3 bites left, and you're like, well, I'm going to be a trooper. I'm going to finish this plate.
1 bite.
That was me with like, I set out like meat and cheese and crackers during the football games, and I ate a Larry Allen's worth of cheese.
This is one of those foods that Like it can congeal in your stomach, and you know what does that for me? And it's a shame because it's tremendous. Like gummy candy, you can't eat too much gummy candy because of how it digests.
I'm not a big gummy candy, except for Swedish fish.
They're good.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
great Swedish fish.
Oh, the non-red stuff. Like you get the bag of. I like orange.
I've never had orange.
We have an hour and 54 minutes before kickoff. Our show will be over. I guess we have to move then so we can watch the game.
Yeah, let's get into it. We have, we have stuff to do.
So one of my favorite media personalities is George Shea. You might know him as the voice of Nathan's hot dog eating contest. He may be the best part of that show, especially with Joey Chestnut not competing. I love his introductions. So what I did, I elicited some AI help today to introduce our top story, George Shea style. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, brace yourselves for the cataclysmic clash that will rock the very foundation of the college football universe. For this is not just a game, it is an epoch, a seismic event, a battle etched into the fabric of time itself. This is the game. A rivalry as fierce as a thunderstorm, as eternal as the roar of the crowd. It is Michigan versus Ohio State. The Wolverines against the Buckeyes, a war waged on a field of emerald under a late autumn sky. This is more than football. This is a collision of philosophies, a duel of destinies, a battle of hearts and minds. It is maize versus scarlet, Wolverine claws versus Buckeye grit, bow versus woody and spirit eternal. This is where heroes are made and legends are born. On this crisp November afternoon, with the echoes of the past swirling in the air and the eyes of the nation fixed on this sacred ground, these gladiators will meet. They will fight not just for a win, but for glory and immortality. Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourselves, for the game is upon us, and it will be nothing short of spectacular.
So it's a big game today, is what you're saying.
And I think that introduction might be better than the game itself. We'll put it that way.
Yeah. I have to ask, if Michigan were to somehow pull this off today, this would have to be certainly the biggest upset in the series in our lifetimes.
Yeah, I mean, bigger than what we experienced in the late '90s.
Right, the John Cooper year, because at least Michigan.
Well, I mean, it's the Ryan Day years now. Let's be honest. I mean, we look back at John Cooper. Ryan Day has a very weak record against top 10 teams, and Michigan is certainly not a top 10 team. Let's get that straight. But he's 1-3 against Michigan. So this game, I think, means more to him than it's meant to any other Ohio coach in the last, I don't know, 20 in our lifetime, even Cooper.
Yeah, I would say this is probably the biggest game in terms of for one of the coaches, maybe since like Tressel won it and they went on to the Fiesta Bowl against Miami. Like that was really like Tressel kind of arriving on the national stage.
Yeah, I remember
been a Youngstown guy.
When Tressel showed up at the Michigan Ohio State basketball game. And really he jumped right into the rivalry. If I had to, and we're going to talk about this later in the show, if I had to think about like the top moments in this rivalry, obviously mine are skewed more towards maize and blue, but Jim Tressel's introduction to the crowd, that was big for them, almost as big as Woody saying, "I wish I could have gone for 3."
Right.
You know, I mean, and Day doesn't come off as the kind of big game coach that Tressel or Meyer were, and it's highly likely that Ohio wins today. They're 20-point favorites, which in a rivalry game is
ridiculous.
It's like being 45-point favorites against Illinois. What's big about this game, I think, for Ohio, a couple things. Number one, they're playing at home. That's all. It's always hard to win on the road. 2, they have the nation's #1 ranked defense, and they're going up against one of the worst offensive teams Michigan has put out in the last, I don't know, long time.
And a very predictable Michigan offense because they cannot throw the ball.
No, well, they can't throw the ball deep. What they can do is that they can throw the ball short, but if they can throw the ball against this Ohio defense, that's big. If Michigan wants to win this game, they have to run the ball and control the clock, keep the ball away from the high-powered, high dollar value Ohio offense. The only thing that might help them, and I saw AccuWeather has this game time temperature around 30, which that's hard to throw in. Let's put it this way: it's easier to throw in like 65 to 75 than it is to throw in 30. It's just easier to play in those conditions.
Look, give me 30 with a lot of wind. That favors Michigan. 30 with like a steady 15-mile-an-hour wind.
What we really need is a snowstorm circa 2021, but I don't think we're getting that.
Yeah.
Or remember you ever see video of the Snow Bowl in 1950?
Yes.
I was looking up some old Michigan Ohio moments. I came across that video, which you have to see the video to fully appreciate how bad that was.
Snow makes every football game better.
From your couch. From your couch.
Right. Yeah, I don't want to be there in that stuff. No.
I saw an NFL playoff game. I want to say it's the Vikings, and if I say it with enough conviction, people will believe me. There was a punt that goes up, and it just plopped right in the snow. It's so great. I think it was a playoff game, too, by the way.
One of my earliest football playoff memories is the Fog Bowl. Which
the Bears.
Yeah, which I'm sure you remember.
What's eerie about that, when we lost Jerome Brown, the highlight video or the memorial video that was put together, there was video of Jerome Brown leaving the Fog Bowl into the fog. That was such an eerie way to end that memorial.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what a wild game. But we're not going to see that in Columbus today. Clear conditions, blue skies, just really cold. And Michigan has a chance to do what they haven't done in a very long time, and that is to send the Ohio senior class off gold pantsless. They haven't won 4 in a row in a very long time. In my heart, I think Michigan has a chance because it's a rivalry game and you throw the records out. And Michigan coming off a very good offensive performance last week, granted against Northwestern. I'm not too excited. If there's anything about momentum and, what have you done to beat Ohio this week, I'm saying why not? Why not us? Why not now? In my head, Ohio wins this game by 4 touchdowns.
Right. And, the only thing that gives me hope, like you'd said, is Ryan Day's track record in big games.
But the big close games, if this game isn't close, Day can't outsmart himself. That's the thing. I think talent, will help him, and he'll pat himself on the back. I
wonder if he'll give into that temptation if they're up in the second half to try to keep the starters in, run up the score. We're going to score 100 on them, kind of mentality.
He scored 60 a couple of years ago. It's not going to help him play. Ohio's in the playoff, so there's the old Steve Spurrier mantra that we have to run up the score to impress the voters.
Right.
That's out the window. And honestly, it's a rivalry game. You've lost 3 in a row, and if it's going to make you feel better to beat up on a 6-win Michigan team that's 20 starters out of a national title, that's fine. Do you? But at the end of the day, I think Ohio is almost in a no-win situation. They're expected to win this game, and if it's close, how is the game this close? God forbid they lose. I don't think Day coaches in the playoffs. Like I've seen enough reports that say if they lose this game, he has to win a national title to save his job. I don't know.
Ohio State has never been quick to pull the trigger in my lifetime. I forget. There was the one coach Ohio State had where they fired him the week of the game. But they were like, but you can coach it. This is like an 87 or 88. This was pre-Cooper.
Okay.
But you think of how many times Cooper, and not just lost to Michigan, but went in with teams that were ranked in the top 2, top 3, that like they were looking, at the, pre-BCS at the Rose Bowl being a potential national championship
National
game
title
for them.
game, yeah.
And John Cooper couldn't get it done, and they kept bringing him back. I do wonder how much slack they'll give Ryan Day if he were to lose this.
Probably more than you and I would have, but or some of the crazy fans. And you'll have to see where the playoffs go. And we'll talk about the playoffs here in a second, and what might happen, win or lose. Head and heart, Tim. Who do you have today?
I have Ohio State to the tune of something like 42-14. If I'm saying what the most likely scenario is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a bad. I don't think that's a bad score. I think in my head I had 37-10, but yeah, I could be coerced 42. It's close. However, if Michigan comes out of the first quarter tied or down by 6 or less, it'll be a dogfight. That's what I think. I think Ohio has to come out. If they win the toss, usually the thing is you defer. I think Ohio wants to take the ball and score 7 and just keep the gas on in the first quarter. Because if Michigan's close, that it's the Rocky mentality. You can't let an underdog stay close. But we'll see.
Yeah, I agree with that. That Ohio State almost certainly wants to start with the ball and go down and get 6.
So if Michigan wins the toss, I think they take the ball. It's so many interesting facets. Since we could talk about that for 2 hours, but if you look at across college football, as slide there, the Iron Bowl is today. Other big rivalry games. Georgia played a in-state rivalry game last night. Did you see this?
It's funny because I had the basketball doubleheader on ESPN, so I sort of caught up to Georgia Tech after the fact.
I was at dinner for 3 hours. I didn't even know Georgia was playing, but apparently they needed 8 overtimes to beat Georgia Tech. They clinched a spot in the SEC title game and possibly a playoff. The SEC title game opponent, Texas, has Texas A&M later today, but Georgia's 8 overtime game, is that like a crack in the armor of the Bulldogs?
Yeah, and I haven't been terribly impressed with the SEC this year outside of Texas. I was never particularly high on Georgia, even in the preseason. I was maybe a little too high on Alabama to start the season. I think the SEC is kind of coasting on reputation at this point.
I think that if you look at the ratings, like 1 through 12, the college football rating, the playoff ratings 1 through 12, 13, 14, and 15, just on the outside looking in, are Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina, just waiting possibly for one team to drop out. And here's where I'll put up the playoff as it is right now, according to the college football ratings. And what I wanted to talk about earlier, it makes sense now. If Michigan pulls off the upset, I don't know what that does to the Big Ten title game, because that gives Ohio its second conference loss. Both Indiana and Penn State play today teams they should win, so they would have 1 loss. I don't know who the tiebreaker goes to because they didn't play head-to-head. I'm going to say Indiana because they're rated above Penn State in the standings. That would put Indiana in a position possibly to get that 5 spot, which, I think we talked about earlier as like the magic spot. Like, I don't think Ohio State wants to win the Big Ten. They want to beat Michigan, but I don't think they want to beat Oregon, because if you look at right here, I don't know who the Big 12 champion is going to be. It's Arizona State, Colorado with a big win yesterday.
And it could be doing it.
It could be BYU. It could be Arizona. Any of those teams, then with a win, go to play Boise. Any of those teams, I think, beats a bye, and then either Georgia, Tennessee.
What do you think about I feel like a lot of people are looking at the classic, Power Five conference teams as just automatically being better than, the BYU's and.
If you look at Boise State took Oregon into the fort, like they played them tight.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about BYU. I'll be honest. I haven't watched a lot of Big 12 football outside of like a couple highlights of Colorado and Sanders and Travis Hunter. I when you get down to the final 12, I don't care who they are. They're all good teams. They're all there for a reason. But some teams are just they have a better pedigree. And quite honestly, I would much rather play Arizona State or BYU than Georgia or Tennessee.
I agree with that, but I'll be interested to see how the smaller programs, just because we're talking about the introduction of money into NCAA football is supposed to be like either cause a greater disparity that the programs with money will throw it around, or it'll be the great leveling factor where the Boise's and the SMU's and the BYU's and whoever Colorado can turn it around in 2 years like they did. It'll be interesting to see how this playoff plays out.
The portal changes all of that, and I think to compare this to college basketball, you always get the upset in March Madness with the team like James Madison or Davidson or Stephen F. Austin or some really small school you've never heard of, because they've got a team of 4 seniors and a junior who played together for so long.
Right.
You don't see a lot of that in the top 10, like Ohio has a new quarterback and Michigan bringing in all kinds of money for their team next year. The transfer portal has changed. It's basically made it mini professional where you have free agency now.
Right.
And it's got to be hard to coach like that. I think we talked about this. Not only you're recruiting high school kids, you're now recruiting your own kids and other colleges' kids.
Right. It's tough enough to even retain your own studs.
It makes it hard to keep that consistent core.
Yeah. And Colorado was ranked 25. I'll be interested. So Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter are leaving. I'll be curious to see if Deion, how long he stays in Boulder. I'll be interested to see if they can sustain what they're doing.
The word on the street is, the Giants draft Sanders 1 and then hire Deion. I've seen Dallas as rumored to. I mean, Dallas is probably in no position to draft Sanders if he's going to go number 1. We'll do our mock draft in February. But it's got to be weird for Deion if he's going to coach in the NFL. Do you want to coach your kid or do you want to coach against your kid?
Right.
That's a wild. It blow my mind. It reminds me of I was in 6th grade doing martial arts up in Kingston, and there was a new instructor that came in who introduced like a new one-on-one. It wasn't like sparring, but it was like half sparring, and we had coaches. And my dad was coaching the kid who was sparring against me. And on the drive home, I asked him, like, did that feel weird? He's like, yeah, a little bit. But he's like, I knew you would be okay. My dad's telling us got to kick me in the head or something. So, like, that's what Deion's going through right now. That's got to be awkward for him.
Are we definitely saying right now Shadur Sanders is the no doubt about it number 1 pick?
So we'll talk about NFL standings and draft standings here in a little bit.
Right.
If I just look right now, if the season ended today, both the Giants and the Raiders are 2-10. The Jaguars are about to be 2-10. How they do tiebreakers. I mean, if the Giants get the number 1 pick, it's the New York market. They are definitely in line for a quarterback. I think Shador is probably rated higher than the guy from Miami.
Yeah,
and Ward, and Milroe from Alabama. But here's the thing. I don't know if any of them are really number 1 quarterbacks. We've gotten to a point now where, I mean, people are drafting on speculation more than anything.
It's been hard the little bit that I've seen Colorado the last 2 years, it's been hard to evaluate Shador because he's played behind such terrible lines that translates to him kind of having, hit or miss performances because, it's so dependent on if his line's protecting him or not.
So, I mean, it comes down to a lot of what they do in the combine, if they have a Mike Mamula combine or not. If he throws at the combine, a lot of times a guy like him might say, well, I'm not going to do if I'm already projected to be top 3, what can I do to make myself better? So he might not even do a lot at the combine.
Or some guys like do it at a pro day where they can control the variables a little more. They can pick who their receiver is, throw an indoor, outdoor, whatever.
If they're like a Michigan quarterback, well, we're not going to do this outside. let's go inside the practice facility. Versus like Miami, it depends on the weather, I guess. But yeah, as far as going back to the playoff is concerned, a lot of that is going to get decided in the next 2 weeks, especially in the Big 12. The rest of the bracket, I mean, it's pretty set. Penn State, Indiana is going to fluctuate based on this week. Right. But I don't think they go. I don't think either one of them lose, so I think they're locked in there. I don't think Notre Dame loses to USC. Georgia, Tennessee, I don't know who Tennessee ends the year with. But this is pretty locked in unless there's a big upset in championship weekend, which we'll talk about next week.
If you had to guess right now, if you had to say who your national championship game would be, essentially, who do you think the 2 best teams or the 2 most likely to meet are in your mind?
Texas, Ohio.
See, I was thinking Texas, Oregon, but then I see Notre Dame as a 7 there. The little bit I've seen in Notre Dame, I really like them. I think they could be a dark horse.
They could. I mean, I think Ohio's learned from their loss at Oregon, and I don't know where the semifinal game would be played. If that's the Rose Bowl or the Cotton Bowl or the Sugar Bowl, wherever that game is played, Ohio will travel. I think Oregon will too, but I think Oregon on a neutral field is a little different story. And yeah, Texas Notre Dame would be a really good game. I think Texas is stronger.
Yeah, I still.
And again, it would be on a neutral field.
Yeah, I still like Texas as the best team in the country.
Which is nice. It's nice to have a playoff where at least it's decided on the field. We can argue a little bit about who we think is bigger and better. We showed you the bracket last week on Sunday. It hasn't changed. Today, 1:00, we have the Kutztown Slippery Rock semifinal here in the Eastern bracket. Ashland, California. Full report coming up on our next show about how these teams have done. I'm picking Cal out of this bracket. I think you had Slippery Rock coming out.
Yeah.
I mean, one of us might be right. Both of us might be wrong. If Ashland wins it all, who knows? One thing we're not wrong about is how just awful the Bears have looked recently, man. It wasn't too long ago. The Bears were 4-2. And if you take out the 20-point loss to Arizona and the what the heck loss to New England, of the 6 games they've lost in a row, they've lost by a combined 10 points, some of which were in magnificent fashion. The latest of these in grand magnificent fashion against the Lions on Thanksgiving. Let me tell you something. The first half was one of the worst first halves I've ever seen. I mean, it was, at one point it was like the Bears ran 9 plays and the Lions had 16 first downs.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember at one point it was 9 plays for the Bears to 21 plays in Bears territory for the Lions.
Unbelievable. But and somehow, I mean, I got disgusted and I said, I didn't watch the third quarter. I think half of the fourth quarter. Somehow the Bears made a game of it, and that seems like they've done this in a couple of their other losses. There's no quit there, which is good, but there's just ineptitude from the head coach. Which,
how does that happen? I still don't.
In the last drive, I mean, some of the blame has to go to your rookie quarterback, just a little bit. The lack of urgency, taking 3 sacks on that last drive, the last of which knocked them out of field goal range. But if you're the head coach and you see after the 3rd sack, Williams doesn't quite know the play, doesn't know the situation, might not know down in where he is in the field. He might not know the line to get for a field goal. with 26 seconds left. Just call a timeout.
Right.
With 24 seconds left, call a timeout. With 22 seconds left, what are you doing?
How does everyone in America know what to do in that situation except the guy who was supposed to know?
Seriously.
Like,
I mean,
the
there's a lot
camera
of
went back
times
to him
where
and he looked completely befuddled. Like he was like, "Oh, but that's not the end of the game, right? We've got another quarter,
a whole
maybe."
other half, right? There's a lot of times where people like you and I will say, well, we could have done a better job. There's one instance in my life where I've said this. I was at a Yankee game with my dad, and Joe Torre put Enrique Wilson out in right field. Enrique Wilson made 3 errors, and he grounded into 3 double plays. I told my dad, I said, look, that I would have done better out there. I really think I might have made 1 error. I think I make 2 of the plays. And I
And you
strike out
strike
4
out 3
times.
times. Yeah.
I strike out 4 times, and they get 3 extra at bats because of me. I've coached junior high football for 8 years. I know a lot about power eye. I love counter traps. I can run a tight end dump. I mean, I'm not Bill Walsh over here. I knew situational football though. And Eberflus, I think he might have been trying to get. He was like poking the bear, like, how much can I get away with? What if I lose like this? Are you going to fire me? Well, they did.
Even if they didn't have any timeouts, how aren't they rushing back to the line to clock it then?
And I think that comes with game preparation. I think that's game week stuff that, Bill Belichick was the master at this. He was not ill prepared for any situation. Like, you could have said to him, all right, there's 18 seconds left. You're up by 3. You're on the left hash mark inside your own 15-yard line. What do you do? And he might ask this question. So, okay, who's the referee? What's the weather? What's the wind? Because he knew all of that.
Right.
Eberflus was playing video game football, just picking a play. Let's run wheel.
Like, do you think he gets even like a coordinator shot again, or do you think that the memory of this will be?
Here's the thing: defensively, he's a defensive-minded guy, which I wasn't a big fan of coming in. But the Bears' defense had played pretty well up to a point. I mean, the New England game, I don't know where the defense went there. And then you start playing against really good teams. Like Jared Goff is like I lost the word. He's a dark horse MVP candidate in my head. Like, he's been really good. So the way the defense played against Detroit notwithstanding, I mean, maybe I think you take a year off to have people forget about this. And I think the coaching list is short enough that he probably gets a coordinator job somewhere on the defense.
But the only example I can think of as an Eagles fan was Rich Kotite being terrible, but he still got another chance with the Jets.
Well, that's the Jets,
right? That's that's like the football equivalent of like managing in the minors for a year or 2.
I mean, so now the Bears. I mean, imagine you're Thomas Brown. So you get signed as the passing game coordinator this year, and then when they fire Shane Waldron, he becomes the offensive coordinator, and now he's the head coach, and he's got 5 games to audition. I looked at a list of potential Bears head coaches, and there's some interesting names on the list. I mean, Cliff Kingsbury, who they could have brought in to run the offense, but they said no, and he went to Washington, and we know what he's doing with Jaden Daniels. I saw Bill Belichick on the list. I'm not sure Belichick wants to come to Chicago, but
I mean, Belichick's what, 72?
Yeah, but I think he might be interested in breaking Shula's record, so he's got to get in somewhere if he's interested. But the 2 names that jumped out to me, Thomas Brown, based on what he started as a passing game coordinator. But the one that's intriguing to me the most is the Detroit offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. He's in the division. What he's done with that offense is really good. What he's done with Jared Goff is nothing short of spectacular. And Caleb Williams will have largely the same offense around him if they can only draft some offensive linemen that stay healthy.
What's ever happened to a guy who came up as a name for every job over the past 5 or 6 years? Eric Bieniemy. He was supposedly the coach in waiting in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And then he
But
went to Washington, where he was like,
others in Washington.
but he's a guy who everyone was like, oh, what a great offensive mind, who never got the chance. And now no one really talks about Eric Bieniemy anymore.
People said the same thing about Matt Nagy coming from Kansas City. And he was unimpressive in Chicago, but he didn't have nearly the offensive weaponry that they have now. Like, aside from their offensive line, which has devolved from they were average last year, they are well below average this year, and injuries haven't helped them. They've got tools. So for a 4-win team, and this is a 4-win team. I had them at 10 or 11 wins before the year started. Just shows how dumb I am.
And let's also point out they're playing in what is far and away the best division in football.
They haven't played their division games until now. Like, they just lost to the Packers and Vikings and Lions, and they've got them coming up again. Like, they're all ahead of them. Some of the games they've played, they should have beaten the Colts, but okay, that was early. The Patriots, they should have beaten the Patriots. Washington was a slapped Hail Mary away from, a win there. They've just lost so many close games. Like I said, in their 6-game losing streak, you take out the 20-point loss to Arizona, and you take out the 16-point loss to the Patriots, 4 games, 10 total points. They're just awful, and Eberflus awful. 5-19 in 1-score games, and that goes to preparation and coaching to me.
At least it feels like the team is building to something, though. I think getting Eberflus out of there.
And like you said, Ohio not really changing coaches in the middle of it. Chicago's never done this,
right,
in the McCaskey era. So I think that they can sense the urgency of, dude, we might have something, but you had to get Eberflus out of there. And
I'll throw another name out there. What about someone like Chip Kelly?
I don't think Chip Kelly would be necessarily bad with this offense, and if Michigan wins today, I'd love to see Chip Kelly go to Chicago, because I think he's probably the heir apparent in Columbus. So
right,
I would be okay with that. Absolutely.
Yeah, it seems like they have to go offense with this hire, though.
Oh, please offense, because the last couple, oh no. It feels like the curse of Lovie Smith, another defensive coach who they fired just after a winning season. But speaking of winning seasons,
I know that guy.
The second most popular Barkley in Philadelphia, maybe on tap to another dark horse candidate for MVP. You said earlier this week, he's on pace to break the single season rushing record. What are your thoughts on Barkley potentially winning an MVP this year?
A lot can still happen. He's in the conversation because of the 255-point game he did in prime time. History says it's going to be a quarterback, and it just kind of feels like Josh Allen would have to be considered maybe the favorite right now. But I think if Barkley would become the 9th running back to go over 2,000, not every back who's gone over 2,000 has won MVP, but I believe 5 have. But if he breaks Dickerson's record, I think it's got to be Barkley.
Does the extra game hurt him?
I don't think so. It didn't hurt Dickerson that he did it in 16.
Mickey Mantle. It's the Roger Maris asterisk for a while.
Well, Dickerson faced a little of that in 84 because he did it in 16 when OJ did it with 14 games in 73. But I think with the way that running the ball and running offense has been marginalized for the last 10 years, I think the fact that he's doing this at all, I think will be celebrated more than anything.
I'm glad you said that, because this year it's like the return of the elite running back. If you look at the top 3 running backs now in the NFL, Barkley, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, all of them free agents, new teams this year. The new teams right now, Philadelphia, the Ravens are 8-4, the Packers 9-3. Not largely only because of the running game, but the running game has helped. The combined records of the teams they've left, 7-28. They were just bad teams before, and these three guys got themselves into good situations. And you know, it's a quarterback award almost. Early Mr. Brainy Pants for you, Mr. Smarty Pants. Do you know the last time a running back won the MVP?
It wasn't Henry when he went over 2,000, was it?
No, you're right. He did not win it.
Adrian Peterson?
2011, Adrian Peterson to beat Peyton Manning. And then before that, you have to go all the way back to 2005.
Oh, wow. Who did it?
Sean Alexander.
Oh, yeah.
Tomlinson won. Like they went back to back. Tomlinson, then Alexander. But yeah, so it's
and before that,
it's an outside shot for them.
Yeah, I just think when you look at how much disarray that offense was in to end last season, and how being able to run the ball has been just such a stabilizing factor in that offense. Like when other things aren't working, when Hurts, is being a little spotty, they can always rely on Saquon.
Yeah, and in the passing game as well, he brings that element to him. And we talked about Derrick Henry and the Baltimore Ravens hosting your Philadelphia Eagles on December 1st.
Yeah, Sunday.
That's tomorrow. Oh, dude. for the longest time, I'm thinking we've been doing the show on Sundays. I'm like, today's the 30th. I see the schedule says December 1. Are they playing Monday? No, at 4:25? No. So that they are probably the mark. It's got to be the game of the week.
I'm surprised they didn't get flexed to prime time.
Who's our primetime game?
I don't know who the Sunday is.
Buffalo, San Francisco, which, I mean, provided San Francisco not having any injuries, would have been a marquee game.
Right.
But yeah, I think Philly, Baltimore is clearly a bigger matchup.
That's what the flex was created for, because you understand why Buffalo, San Francisco would have looked good, when you're making a schedule.
Absolutely.
But with the injuries, I'm just surprised that they don't have Philly, Baltimore in prime time.
Yeah, what's tough about Thanksgiving week, 4 games already in the books. So in that 4:00 America's game hour, you've only got 3 games to pick from. The Rams and Saints, the Bucks and Panthers, and then the Eagles and Ravens. So I don't know if they want to take the game of the week thing away. But we're getting to the point now in the NFL where you're going to have a game on Thursday. In 2 weeks, I think they start Saturday games.
Yeah.
Like Sunday becomes.
It's so weird to have a 3:00 NFL game.
Was this the first Black Friday game? Or have they done that before and I just missed it?
I don't know.
Because they made it seem like it was a big thing, like, oh, NFL, Black Friday, Amazon Prime.
Like when I think of Black Friday football growing up, I think of like
Nebraska, Colorado. Yeah. I don't think of the NFL, but what do I know? One last thing to go into NFL-wise, and it is our Black Friday game, another close one. If you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, they will now have a chance to defend their title. They've clinched the playoffs. The last 3 games they've won have been by a total of 7 points. They're 11th in the league in point differential at plus.
They're the anti-Bears.
Well, the Bears actually, believe it or not, have a +1 point differential. But yeah, they're winning all the close games, and the wins don't come without controversy. So here it is. The Raiders down 2. They have the ball. Aiden O'Connell on the last drive looking like Tom Brady, hitting his receivers, moving the ball down the field. The Raiders are in position for a potential game-winning field goal. Their kicker missed 2 already, but they're in line. They just need the 1, and there's a botched snap. And the Chiefs fall on the ball, and you think, oh, no controversy. The Chiefs win. But the referee at the top of the field comes in, waving false start.
And whistling it dead.
That's a dead ball. Then the referees talk. And then we change it to an illegal shift, which the Chiefs can decline. You can't decline a false start.
Right.
I mean, but an illegal shift you can, and therein lies, more fuel for the conspiracy theorists. Tim, what do you think?
And this is where not only the legalization of gambling, but the prominent marketing during games of gambling.
DraftKings,
You know,
yeah.
I think if Tim Donaghy never happened, uh, it would just be more like whispers. But we have proof that a professional official, in that case in the NBA, was fixing games. This isn't just like point shaving that was happening like in our grandfather's day. This isn't something like the mob was influencing in the 50s. It's happening now. And when we see things like this, when we see the missed face mask in the end zone a couple weeks ago, when we see, very wild and creative interpretations of pass interference, it brings the legitimacy of these games into legitimate question.
I don't disagree with that at all. In this game, the line was 13.5, and Vegas had covered that already. So they weren't that. I'll be honest. I was at dinner for 6 hours. I didn't see any of this game, so I don't know how the calls went throughout the game. I don't think the Raiders at 2 wins are anywhere near the Chiefs at 11 wins.
Right.
So how it kept that close?
Well,
I don't know if that was.
And now the concern is over like affecting parlays rather than the overall, because that's what was happening in the NBA last year. I can't remember the player, but he said if he knew he was the under, like there's a parlay that involved him being the under, like scoring 9.5 points. He would go out on the floor and then he'd be like, oh, my hamstring, and then he would be done for the game. So the parlay would still count because he'd appeared on the court, but he would bet the under or tell people to bet the under on those particular parlays. And so if we're looking at, number of turnovers, being an over under prop bet or parlay, that could be affected in this case where they're ruling it was in fact a fumble recovery.
I wonder, and I kind of hope he did. Like back in the days when the Patriots were in the Super Bowl and you look at the prop bets, there was a prop bet as to what color hoodie Bill Belichick would wear. What's stopping him from just calling a random number in, Topeka, Kansas, saying, "Hey, it's going to be gray. Bet the house."
I would change hoodies every commercial break. I would have tearaway hoods on my hoodie.
And that's why Bill Belichick is the greatest coach of all time, and we're not, because he's not worried about silly, ridiculous stuff like that. But you bring up a good point that with the advent of legalized gambling, especially on like your little rectangle, you could make in-game bets, like what the next play is going to be. It's like live, real-time action gambling.
And it's on the crawl during broadcasts, like as the line is changing for future games or like what it's doing to particular prop bets for rushing yards or passing yards.
Is that going to impact the league going forward? Do you think that becomes a potential stain? Because right now the controversy is that you see the memes with the referees wearing red and white with a Chiefs hat because it seems every call goes Kansas City's way, and Kansas City just feels like if they feel like the $1 Million Man at WrestleMania 4. Oh, he's got this bye. Oh, he cheated his way to this win again, and like. Who's the Randy Savage in the AFC that beats him in the finals?
Right, and as a fan, how can it not start to feel that way when this keeps happening? What used to be before the legalization of gambling, it was just like, oh, these officials are terrible. But now more and more you hear, oh, these officials are on the take. And I think that's a real problem for the league.
When you bring up Tim Donaghy, I could say, oh, people are just, conspiracy theorists. You're not wrong, and that's a big problem going forward, where there's no way to disprove it. That's the thing.
And I mean, look at Ohtani in the spring. What was the first thing that people were saying? Oh, he was involved in
Pete Rose and versus Ohtani. Ohtani is now going after his interpreter for hundreds of thousands of dollars of baseball cards. Hundreds of thousands. So here's the thing. This man just signed a $700 million contract. He's worried about $200,000 of baseball cards. That's like me yelling at you about, hey, I picked up that dinner for $12. When you come on. Or when you know what, you are better at this than I am in terms of segues with Ohtani and money. Earlier this week, the Los Angeles Dodgers announced they signed 31-year-old starting pitcher Blake Snell to a 5-year, $182 million contract. According to some online sources, the Yankees, Red Sox, and Orioles were all in on Snell prior to this decision. I don't know if those teams were real, actual contenders, though. I think Boris might have just been using them to drive the price up. The contract terms, though, a lot of that money is signing bonus. So now here's the Dodgers doing, Kansas City Chiefs level magic with their payroll. How do you feel about this one?
I don't like on the heels of the Ohtani contract. I don't love it. It really feels like a loophole that the league has to address. Like either you have a salary cap or you don't,
And they don't, which I'm fine with if you want to spend your money. They have a de facto salary cap with the luxury.
Yeah.
I mean, the NBA has something similar to that kind of, sort of, but not really.
But
the NBA maxes contracts out.
Like this is becoming I read something, I'm trying to remember the exact number. I think since 2022 or 2023, there have been 7 contracts worth $100 million or more handed out in Major League Baseball, and 5 of them are from the Dodgers. Like, how's a small market supposed to compete with that?
Oh, they're not. I mean, that's you have to look at a team like the Marlins in the 90s and in the 2000s. They built from within. They want you're looking to win one, and then you blow it up. The Kansas City Royals, they won in 2015. They blew it up. The Rangers and Diamondbacks just last year, they made you've got like that one window to get through. But a big market team, they can afford their mistakes. That was the big thing with the Yankees in the 2000s era. They could afford a mistake, whereas like Tampa couldn't. Oakland couldn't. If they made a mistake, like if they went out and signed a big name for 5 years, $120 million, and he busted, those 5 years, they were done.
Yeah, I think that's one of the points of, especially the book Moneyball, that people miss, is how you have to hit on a higher percentage of your signings than the big boys, just like you said, because they can eat the contract. Where in Oakland or Pittsburgh or Kansas City, they're not throwing out those big deals, but even those like the
mid-range deals, the $10 million a year deals.
Right, they're signing like a utility middle infielder. They need to get a return on their investment, whereas the New Yorks and the Bostons and the LAs don't necessarily have to.
And you talk about the big utility guys. The Dodgers, again, in the news just yesterday, extended their super utility guy, Tommy Edman. They gave him an extension of 5 years, $74 million. That extension is a small market, big major contract.
And also,
so even more money.
And I was reading, there's, I can't remember the player's name. He's a phenom in Japan, though. He's like, and the Dodgers are front runners to sign him.
Well, here's the thing with that. So going back to Snell, if you're Boston or New York, our teams, both teams are every team is in the line for starting pitching. But the 2 big names left on the market now, Corbin Burns and Max Fried. But Rocky, I don't know how to say his first name, so I won't anymore. But Sasaki is intriguing coming out of Japan because he's coming in under international bonus restrictions. He's under 25 and he has less than 6 seasons of foreign experience. So his contract bonus is only going to be between $1 and $3 million. Heck, you and I could put a GoFundMe together and we could sign Sasaki.
He would have to defer some money for us. The kids might have to wait on college.
But compared to what Burns and Fried are going to get, and what Snell has gotten. Sasaki is very intriguing because of the numbers on his macros, the 102-mile-an-hour fastball, the really good breaking stuff, and after the relative success of Yamamoto coming over, people say Sasaki's better. So I would love to see him in New York. I'd love it, but for $3 million, come on. But yeah. I think again. I thought San Diego might have been a bigger favorite because they have Darvish, and I think he and Darvish were really good buddies.
And for every Shohei Ohtani or Ichiro, you get a middle of the road guy like a Dice K, Hideki Irabu.
I think Dice K is a little bit better than Hideki Irabu, but
right.
You get the lower tier ones like Keiagawa as well.
Right.
Yamamoto's ERA after his first 2 games was 37. He turned it around, though. He had a really good year.
Well, and the other question with Snell is, exactly what are the Dodgers getting? Because, to start this year, he had an ERA close to 10.
He had no spring training, though, and that was Boris's fault. He drug that out way too long. If you look at Snell's second half.
Yeah, he was more himself.
Obviously, at 31, you watch for some of the signs of deterioration. I think for the first 3 years of this contract, he's Cy Young level. Maybe not, a 20-game winner, but he'll go out and win you 16, 17 ERA just north of 3. And on that team, that's
enough.
I don't know where he slots in, like who their number 1, 2, and 3 guys, and they're not done. That's the other thing. The Dodgers aren't done signing things. They are one of the 5 teams in on some guy named Soto.
Oh, that guy.
On ongoing negotiations, they have the team. John Heyman said they have the teams whittled down to 5. There's 2 rounds of negotiating. The Yankees, Mets, Blue Jays, Red Sox, and the aforementioned Dodgers. Heyman thinks that Soto wants 15 years. And it's been reported both Boston and the Yankees have already upped their offers, their initial offers. So maybe they realized that, they weren't going to, like, if the Yankees' first offer was 10 years, 50 million, 500 million, that's not going to cut it.
Has anyone reported a timeline, like his Soto or his representation? Like, have they said when they want to have a deal done by?
By next week, by the winter meetings, which are next week in Dallas. That's what they want. The Snell shoe dropping is, you start to see the wheels in motion. Last year, the Major League Baseball free agency it was a grind. There were so many big names that weren't signed by the end of January, with spring training right around the corner. I think this year starting because of Snell signing, I think we speed it up a little bit. But Soto has to be the first shoe to drop, so that guys like Santander and Taylor Hernandez, like those guys, will have to follow Soto. They're the consolation prizes.
Right. Yeah. Because A, the market gets set, but then B, you see who needs what.
I miss out on him. Well, I've got to audible my way somewhere else. I've seen the number 700 million, and for a guy like Ohtani, you get a pitcher and a hitter, but you don't see a 25-year-old who has numbers like Soto. 15 years brings him up to age 40. What do you think? I mean, if you had the opportunity to sign a 25-year-old Willie Mays in this market today, what does Willie Mays get?
Okay, so I'm trying to think where Willie was in his career by then. He came up pretty young because he wasn't in Birmingham for very long. I want to say by 51 he was already up with the Giants, and by 54 he'd won a World Series.
That is correct. And he won his first MVP in 54, and he lost 53 with military service. He at his age 25 season. It was 1956. He has 150 home runs. He's driven in 360. He struck out 70 times total.
What was his on base? I'm curious.
It's tough to average in my head, but probably around 370.
Okay.
So I mean that's in 51. We'll go 51 to 56, 356, 326, but then 411, 400, 369.
And when you talk about the five tool player, like he is the example that is given. I mean, a 25-year-old Willie Mays
in today's market now,
in today's market, right? He's getting Ohtani money. He's at least 700.
100. So there we are.
Especially with the way that not only the way he got on base, but what he did when he was on base, because with his speed,
run, but the power in the defense too. I mean, Juan Soto's defense is almost undervalued and underappreciated, but
he's not Willie Mays.
He's not Willie Mays, but he's pretty good. 2024,
right?
If he doesn't go back to the Yankees, I don't think the Yankees are done for. I think they really have to reevaluate how they put a lineup together. I loved what he did with that lineup. He reintroduced patience at the plate, and he almost made the Yankees like I'm looking for them to be the bad guy again. Like the Dodgers right now are everybody's heel. Like, dude, what are they doing? What are they doing? And if you take out the 2020 COVID championship, they've only won one title. So, but they're lining themselves up.
I'm curious, just with you being a Yankees fan, what do you think the Yankees' plan B if they don't bring Soto back is?
Teoscar Hernandez, maybe.
Plan B.
I guess. I think they looked to Christian Walker at first, and possibly a big name at third. I hope it's not Nolan Arenado. He's on the wrong side of 30.
Yeah.
Maybe they go out for Burns and Fried, and they try to build a pitching staff. You get Burns, Fried, they go with Cole and Rodon. That's a pretty solid starting staff, but they have to fix the bullpen too. They have a lot of holes for a team that played a World Series close. We'll put it that way. So there we have it. A fine A block here on Soup and Meatballs. I think it's the best A block we've had this week. But everybody's favorite time.
I had a block of cheese on Thursday just watching the early games. That was the best A block I've had.
Well, it's Soup and Meatballs draft time. As we first reported here on Soup and Meatballs, today is the game, and we are 56 minutes and a few seconds away from kickoff. And I thought it would be a good week to if we're drafting players, if we're looking at a draft potential, our all-time favorite Wolverine players, because we don't have any all-time favorite Buckeyes. I have one favorite Buckeye, which I think you would know.
I have one favorite Buckeye, but not in football. Is yours Chris Spielman?
It is not Chris Spielman. You might not know he went to Ohio State. If I say his nickname as the Ultraback, you would know.
Oh, Raymond Harris.
Raymond Harris went to Ohio State, so
yeah, I know he went to Ohio State. Mine was John Havlicek.
There you go.
I've always said if I had a dog, I would name my dog either Walter after the Big Lebowski or Hondo after John Havlicek.
I think Hondo's a good name for a dog. It's not as good as Rhombus, but So George Steinbrenner, also an Ohio guy. Here we are, random list. We get the shuffle. Tell me when to stop.
Stop.
All right, so we got that right there. Bang.
All right. Wesley Snipes let me down last week, but I'm going back to him. Give me Black.
Down again.
Damn it, Wesley.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think we have a lot to choose from, and my list again. These are just our favorites, not the best. If I'm looking, if I have to consider who my favorite is, I go by position, and I've loved this guy when he started in the early '90 or the early '90s, the late '90s, for his entire career, and then he was drafted by the Bears. So that was really cool for me. I'm going to take the A Train, Anthony Thomas, number 1.
I knew that would be your number 1. He was number 5 on my list.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there were 2 other running backs I have higher from right around that time, but I loved those like A Train, David Terrell, like early 2000s offenses.
I like the uniforms a lot better too, like the loose fitting. It's just old '90s football to me.
Yeah, showing a little belly, big oversized pads.
Ooh, excuse me. And he was a good player too. I mean, there's a couple guys on my list are like, but he produced on the field.
So with my number 1, it's not just for the Michigan career, but also what he's done in the NFL. Because he's also a guy who went on to play for my favorite team and had a big impact in Super Bowl 52. Give me Brandon Graham.
Brandon Graham, and he's still playing.
Yeah, he suffered a season-ending elbow injury this past week.
But when was he drafted? It feels like he's been playing for 20. He was selected in the first round of the 2010 NFL draft. He's in the league 14 years.
Gosh. Yeah. And he's been a Pro Bowl level guy. He's been a double-digit sack guy. Even this, with being, in his 14th, 15th year, he's been having a good year. He's been, other than Jalen Carter, maybe the most consistent defensive lineman for the Eagles.
And what he did at Michigan in his time there, yeah, he was a name that he was one of the big names, all conference guy. Yeah, he didn't make my list, but I have no problem with it.
Just a big personality. The mouth's always going on the field. Just a good dude, great player.
No arguments there. My number 2, I've said this before. I don't. My top 3 probably they could fluctuate, and I always wondered how much it would take for this guy to overtake number 1, but he might be like 1B. My number 2 is a guy that wore number 2, Blake Corum.
Blake Corum was my number 2 as well. He's going to be my next pick. Easy guy to root for.
The visual against Penn State last year, when the Mike Vitti busted nose, and the fact that he took a lot of his NIL money and he went and he gave out Thanksgiving turkeys. He was giving back to his community. That kind of stuff, it makes you root for the guy.
Yeah, and the fact that he didn't have to come back.
And I'm amazed he did.
Yeah, he knew he had guaranteed money, and he came back anyway.
It was a good story. Like, his last play could have been the kneel down against Ohio 2 years ago, but he comes back and then he leads the team in part to a national championship. And when they asked, why are you coming back? And, a lot of the mantra was that, well, there's unfinished business. And then the end of the national title game against Washington, where like the maize and blue confetti coming down, there's a picture of Blake Corum with the caption, "Business is now finished." I get goosebumps thinking about that. So I love me some Blake Corum.
So definitely no surprise that you went running back. I'm also going running back. This is just a guy who I just loved. It feels like maybe I loved football more when I was 14, 15, 16. Like there was something about like the discovery of like just learning the game. And so this is a guy who was around that time. It's Tyrone Wheatley.
I already wrote it down.
Yeah.
Again, when I first started watching Michigan football, it was the 91 Rose Bowl against Washington, and Wheatley was on that team. Just the big pads.
Yeah. He was a big guy who could move. He was about 235, but he had, if I remember right, he ran for the track team in the spring. He was a sprinter for the Michigan track team as well, which is amazing for a guy who was like, He was probably 240 by the time he got to the Giants.
Yeah, well, he looked like a he looked like an H back for New York. Um, but for the longest time, he among the all-time leaders for Michigan in rushing and rushing touchdowns. One of the better blockers, I think, in terms of pass protection for running backs for the early '90s teams.
And he's a name when you talk about the great college football running backs of the '90s. I feel like his name
He's
lost in the shuffle a little.
He's right up there. Yeah, and for Michigan teams that were never in contention for national titles, Big Ten titles in the early '90s, yes, but I think his last year there, he went out with an unceremonious game against North Carolina State in the Holiday Bowl or something like that on a Saturday.
Because
December
94 was the year
30th or
they
something
lost.
like that.
94 would have been his
ESPN
senior year.
broadcast.
They lost the Hail Mary to Colorado. And then they lost to that juggernaut Penn State team with, Kajana Carter and Kerry Collins and Kyle Brady and all them.
But and actually, he was actually next on my list. So I had three running backs, which again, probably doesn't shock you. My number three, I will move to the other side of the ball, and this guy played in the early 2000s, and this was around the time where I had discovered internet message boards, and I interact with a couple of guys who do. This guy knows Michigan football. He was an assistant something or another at Michigan when Brady was there. So he knew he had some insights to the program, and he would tell some really good stories about Lamar Woodley when Woodley showed up, and Woodley's he was a beast defensively. And when he got drafted to the Steelers, I remember the year the Steelers and Packers played in the Super Bowl, I bought a Lamar Woodley jersey. I said, well, I can't root for the Packers. I'm not a big Steeler guy, but Lamar Woodley made my list of athletes who played for professional teams in Pennsylvania that I don't hate. Yeah. He might have been number 2 on that list.
And, it's funny because I'd forgotten what a really solid NFL career he had.
He was a perfect fit for at Pittsburgh defense.
Yeah.
Rushing, but his athleticism, he was good in pass coverage too. I think it was his last year at Michigan. He had a pick 6 against Notre Dame, a very important pick 6 that really put that game almost out of reach. So underrated in coverage.
It's funny because looking at my list, Woodley didn't make the list, but that's a great pick.
Oh, Graham didn't make my list. There's a lot of good stuff we could pick from. So don't feel bad.
They've got quite a program. So I have to go with, and I know I've mentioned this before, like the whole reason that as a kid from Pennsylvania that I'm a Michigan fan was Desmond Howard. Even if he'd never won the Heisman, Desmond Howard would be on my list just because he was my gateway to college football and specifically to Michigan football. It was also cool that I got to meet him when we went to.
Where'd you meet him?
When we saw the Redskins and Steelers in Carlisle. He was on the Redskins, or the Commanders now, but he played for Washington. He was drafted his rookie year.
Was that his rookie year? Okay.
Yeah, because 91 was his last year at Michigan, and then that was summer of 92.
That's really cool.
Not a big guy.
How big? That's a dumb question. How big is he? I can very easily tell you.
5'10", 5'11", maybe. Like in 8th grade, I was taller than him.
He could have this on his page here. Just 5'10".
Yeah, because already to start 8th grade, I was like 6 feet, 6'1". I was taller than Desmond Howard. Yeah.
Hi, Desmond.
While your dad's shaking hands with Carl Banks. Carl.
Probably a lot faster than us, though.
Yeah. I didn't get drafted in the first round.
I like that pick. I went more positionally, and none of the great wide receivers made my list. And between Howard and Braylon Edwards, Marquise Walker, David Terrell, there's Mercury Hayes. Remember Mercury Hayes?
I do.
Big time. The game winning catch against Virginia. Now, so great names didn't make my list, and I'm looking at my choices. It's remarkable how they're all basically the same position, and I'm going to go with a guy for my number 4, who, I mean, probably a surprise. I'm not even sure people know the name, but if you look at what this guy looks like, and how he played, as statistically, I think he might have, I don't know, 17 rushing yards, but he was a 6'3", 254-pound fullback who was listed as a tight end, but he played fullback. Give me Ben Mason. And
Wow.
you might have to look him up, but Ben Mason had this mohawk, and he'd come in on goal line situations for Harbaugh. He was Harbaugh's fullback. And my favorite, one of my favorite players now in the NFL is the fullback for the Ravens, Ricard, I think his name is.
Yeah.
If you see pictures of him, he looks like a pro wrestler with his arms. That was Ben Mason back in the 2000s for Michigan.
And it's funny because you talk about fullbacks. I almost went fullback. I almost went John Ritchie, a Pennsylvania guy. He had the devil horns, just a crazy lead blocker, no regard for his body or anyone else's.
Oh.
Wow.
And that's.
I was going to say, I don't know, because I have my list of 10 here, and we haven't had a lot of overlap other than A-Train.
And Corum.
And Corum, right.
I had Wheatley on my list.
I'm going to go with another guy who I had the pleasure to meet and watch play when he was in high school. And ended up having a pretty good career with Michigan, and then played in a Super Bowl with Arizona. I'm going to take Steve Breaston.
Stevie B.
Stevie B.
So we saw him at a Big 33 game, didn't we?
Yeah, he was the MVP.
Was that the game you and I covered together, or was that the year before? I think it was the year before.
No, he was the MVP of the year that Curry coached Pennsylvania. Because Breaston played at Woodland Hills, and I remember Curry told me, as soon as he saw how fast Steve Breaston was, he was like, we're going to beat this. Ohio has no speed. We have Steve Breaston.
The year before, I was interning at NEP. Pennsylvania was sending they sent a couple kids to Michigan that year. Scott McClintock was a linebacker out in Pittsburgh, and I think that might have been the year Marlon Jackson showed up. He was a Pennsylvania guy, I think. Yeah. So Breaston would have been the year you and I went. Okay, yeah. I mean, as far as punt returners go, he was explosive, man. And he was another little guy. He wasn't that big, was he?
He wasn't that big, and he wasn't even like. I don't even think he was really the main threat at receiver because that's when they had Manningham too, Mario Manningham.
Yeah.
So Breaston was more the 2, and Manningham.
He might have been a 3 too.
Yeah, and then I mean, you talk about being part of a great receivers room when he's with Arizona when they won the NFC.
Larry Fitzgerald and
Quan Bolton. Yeah. But
he's not a bad third option.
Well, and they all went over 1,000 yards that year.
Great on special teams, which is a third of the game. They say. So, dude, that's a cool pick. And it's interesting. You have 2 wide receivers now, and I have 3 running backs. So I almost feel like I shouldn't take this running back. He'll be one of my honorable mentions. So I'm going to go back. I have 3 really good of these to pick from, and I am just going to close my eyes and I'm going to pick this guy. When you look up middle linebacker, and one of the best names in all of football, Jarrett Irons.
Sure.
He was a scary looking dude. And he was one of the big time players on on Michigan's championship teams. Heart of Texas, All-American, and the all-time career tackles leader in Michigan history.
Really? I wouldn't have guessed that.
It says at the end of his collegiate career. So I mean that might have been overtaken by like another guy on my list, Devin Bush. But Jared Irons, like back in the time of cool looking extremities on your pads, like the cowboy collar. Jared Irons had like he looked mean.
Yeah, you know, he reminded me of if you remember, Florida State had one of the great nicknames, Marvin Shade Tree Jones. He reminded me of Marvin Jones a little bit. He was like Michigan's Marvin Jones.
Some of the old pictures that I'm just scrolling through right now. He reminds me of the big linebacker from the movie The Program, Alvin Mack.
Oh yeah, I could see that.
Just a guy you don't want to meet, and like if you're a big bad fullback, you don't want to meet him in the hole because he's bigger and badder. So, but man, I had some tough choices I had to pick from. I got news for you.
Well, I'll tell you, my number 4 is the only quarterback on my list, and he was a reason to celebrate when there wasn't a lot of reasons to celebrate Michigan football. You know, the program was maybe down a notch or two. I went Denard Robinson on my list.
Shoelaces, nice.
I went to shoelaces. Running with them shoelaces open. If I remember right, he was a sprint. He was the 100 and 200 champion in Florida and Florida high school state championships.
So fast. The only play I remember, like distinctly, like he had some great moments and something we'll talk about later. The run against Notre Dame.
Yeah,
I'd never seen a Michigan quarterback move that fast ever. It looked like the Notre Dame defense was standing still in concrete. He just ran right through them. That's an interesting pick.
Yeah, because it was like that was definitely a time where being able to see him possibly do something special every week was one of the big draws for watching Michigan because they were.
Was that the year? Was that the year they beat Illinois? It was like 65-63.
Yes.
They had absolutely zero defense.
Yes.
Like Lamar Woodley wasn't walking through that door. Jared Irons wasn't walking through that door. Brandon Graham wasn't walking through that door. Like you and I were walking through the door.
Was that the Illinois team that had Rashad Mendenhall?
Sure. I don't know. I just remember that was always like one of the Big Ten Network's best games ever. Like, dude, this is one of the worst games ever.
Well,
it was so depressing to watch. I mean, they won, that's great, but I don't need 130 points worth of total offense. No, so that is a good list, an interesting list for you. I would have pegged Desmond and Tyrone. I should have thought of Brandon Graham for what he did with the Eagles as well. Did you have any people that made the lists as well that didn't make the final list?
Yeah, you know, just because he's such an odd dude, like he's a real individual. I like JJ McCarthy. I like just the personality of JJ, like meditating before games. He just seems like this weird hippie who just also happens to be like really great at football.
Yeah, arguably the best quarterback in Michigan history.
Yeah, I mean, you know, no less an authority than Jim Harbaugh said so. Now, have I taken my 5?
Yeah, you have Brandon Graham, Tyrone Wheatley, Desmond Howard, Stevie Breston, and Denard Robinson.
Right. Okay. Obviously, I had Charles Woodson on there. Ty Laws, a Pennsylvania guy, was on my list. I had Corum. I thought about putting David Terrell just because I remember that Orange Bowl against Alabama, the Sean Alexander Alabama team.
His career with the Bears knocked him off my list.
I thought it might.
He was not for the Bears what Brandon Graham was for the Eagles. Or
right.
is.
Anyone else who's on your list there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so Woodson made mine, but Woodson was like the no kidding. Obviously, he's arguably the greatest defensive player in college football history. I went with some guys that are like lower named. I remember when Devin Bush came up from Florida, and this was a time when you weren't getting players out of Florida. Another guy that went to the Steelers, ironically enough, but I really like Devin Bush. Steve Hutchinson as an offensive lineman, just he looks like your prototypical lineman. And I looked at guys like Jake Long and John Runyon, that Steve Hutchinson felt more like a guy I would get behind. And then some lower names that you might not think of. As far as linebackers go, Victor Hobson was a guy that I was back and forth with him and Irons for my 5th pick. I loved Victor Hobson. The fullback for the 97 team, Chris Floyd, just a solid team guy. And surprisingly then, the last guy ranks 3rd all time among running backs in terms of receptions and receiving yards. BJ Askew. I loved BJ Askew.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
I was thinking possibly like going tight end, like a Jake Butt or Jeremy.
Jake Butt. Well, you were a tight end, so I figured a Butt guy would be, or Jeremy Tooman.
Yeah, Tooman from the 97 team. But I'm happy with my picks. I'm happy, that I got to meet 2 of them. Kind of a cool deal.
As far as a list of our favorites, there is no winner or loser. We both win. I win because I got the first pick, and I don't think you were going to take Anthony Thomas, so everybody's happy. So there's
Thomas was 5th on my list.
Well, he wasn't going to make it to 5.
No.
So that's a look at our draft. And speaking of 5, it's our top 5 time. And in keeping with the game and the fact that there's 34 minutes before kickoff, we're going to look at our top 5 favorite moments from the Michigan-Ohio rivalry. I went first in the draft, Tim, so why don't you lead us off? What is your number 5 favorite moment?
So I had to look up the details, but I remember just sort of like the lead up to the 93 game, where it was one of those John Cooper teams that, just beat Michigan, and the Rose Bowl becomes.
Was that the year? Northwestern went in 95, I think.
Right. But in 93, that's when, when it was a mess, where Florida State had a loss, Notre Dame had a loss, Nebraska had did they have a loss, or they lost to Florida State in the bowl game? But Ohio State was undefeated, and Michigan went in there and put 28-0 on them as the number 2 team in the country. So not even a close game. They won by 4 touchdowns. Like, you talk about Mercury Hayes, he had a touchdown, and you talk about John Ritchie, he had a touchdown in that game. So to go in there and just destroy their dreams like that is amazing. And that was also a game I remember where Ohio State was like, if John Cooper doesn't win this, he's out. Ooh. And then he lost, and they were like, no, we'll keep him anyway.
And we'll keep him anyway. That's if you look at the 93 Michigan team as well, it was one of their 4 loss teams. And was that one of the last years of Gary Moeller?
Yeah, because then Moeller in 94, I believe it was, that Moeller.
94 was his last year there. I mean,
he got replaced in season because he had some legal problems, and they had to promote Carr.
That was Carr's first year then, and that was another All-American Ty Law and Tyrone Wheatley on that team. Good call, man. Good call. So it was a home win for Michigan there. My number 5 is a home win, and it's almost within a calendar year. I'm going last year, 2023, with Harbaugh suspended in a game that featured a 1-loss Ohio team, undefeated Michigan team, and at the end where it looked like Ohio's just driving. We couldn't stop them until Rod Moore sealed it with a pick. The only thing that bugs me about that is I can't think of his name off the top of my head. The broadcast call Gus Johnson. Gus Johnson bothers me. Even when he's homering for Michigan, it's just he's too much.
I don't like how he has to keep using nicknames that he's come up with 100 times in a broadcast.
Maserati Marv can burn in Arizona.
because last week he kept calling the one kid Waffle House because he's open 24/7. It's like, all right, Gus, we get it. You're clever, dude. Like, don't beat us over the head with these nicknames. But
But Keith Jackson, I love me some Keith Jackson. His whoa Nelly, he would get into it without becoming, hyperbolic. But
see, I don't mind Gus Johnson. It's just the nicknames.
going back to last year, though,
Yeah.
making it 3 in a row, spot in the Final Four as the number 1 seed. I'm going Rod Moore.
And when I think about last year's game, I just think about that one ridiculous touchdown throw where JJ just thread the needle through 8 different pairs.
Right. So then the linebacker had his back turned and it was right by his head or something.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Right past his ear hole.
On a dime. Yeah, absolutely. Phenomenal throw. You know what? That should almost make the list too.
Yeah. Just when he threw it, I was like, no. And then,
and then the guy catches it.
And I was like, oh, wow. That's how memories happen.
Oh, yeah. That was a tremendous throw.
My number 4, the aforementioned Desmond Howard. And it's only 4, even though it's one of my first college football memories. But the punt return and the pose.
Okay. We will hear more about that later.
Yeah.
It made my list too, obviously.
I remember seeing something where he was telling a story about that, where he was dating a gymnast at the time who was trying to tell him, if you ever score a touchdown in a big moment, you should do a backflip in the end zone. And so he was inside the 10 and he's like, I'm going to do the backflip. And then he's like, no, he's like, because if I don't stick the landing, I'm going to be on SportsCenter for the wrong reason. So then he just decided to do the Heisman pose instead.
What's going through your mind at the 10-yard line and you're going to score? That's amazing.
Yeah.
He's thinking about his girlfriend. Good for him.
Yeah. The pose is my number 4.
So my number 4, you talked about one of your favorite Michigan players being being Denard Robinson. In 2011, Ohio came into this game 6-5, very similar to what Michigan is now. Michigan wins the game 40-34, very close game. So that kind of gives me hope for today. But Denard Robinson accounting for all 5 touchdowns and just owning the Buckeyes in a way that I don't think we've seen a quarterback own them back then, because that Ohio had started their, not their dominance over Michigan, but he had 3 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns. It was the Denard Robinson show in Ann Arbor. So the 2011 game for me, overshadowing maybe the running of Fitzgerald Toussaint, who was just, as far as running, he might have been one of my least favorite running backs that we've had, but Toussaint had a good game that game as well. But I'm going to go Denard in 2011.
Yeah, and it's a shame because Denard really kind of gets overlooked because of the era that he played, where Michigan was kind of in flux with coaches and they weren't quite at the level they were used to, or the level that they've been at the last few years. But I mean, and especially that day with the 5 touchdowns, just incredible stuff.
Your 3.
My 3. You're probably going to be surprised it's only 3, but I'm going with 2021. Breaking the streak.
Amazingly, ironically enough, my number 3, I specified it as Haskins' 5 touchdown day. So Hassan Haskins scoring 5 touchdowns in the 2021 game with the snow. So I mean, we're in sync there for our number 3.
I just, the memory I have of that is the snow and just everyone storming the field. Just what a wild scene it was when it was actually over.
And I think the thing that I liked the most was Ohio opening the Red Sea and letting Haskins score. Yes. Because it was a smart thing for them to try to get the ball back. Aiden Hutchinson was huge in that game, from what I remember defensively. And the first big win, I think, of of the Harbaugh era. And when you look at that 3-year stretch that he put together there, and what was it, 10 in a row or something like that? It felt like 10.
It had been, was it every year from 2012 to 2019 for Ohio State? Then the COVID year where they don't play.
Which we don't count. They would have won that game too, probably. Let's be honest.
Right.
But,
so, yeah, 2021 would have been the first time since, I believe, 2011.
Yeah, I think that's not a surprise it made both of our lists, especially in recent memory, where there might not have been a lot of good memories the last 15 years.
The 2000s and 2010s was all Ohio State, between Tressel and Urban. Well, we won't mention him.
The other guy. So Haskins 5 touchdown days. My 3, our 3 is the same. What's your number 2? I have an idea.
My number 2 is just the absolute day Charles Woodson had in '97.
Okay, so you're going Woodson.
Punt return, just absolutely, to my mind, clinched the Heisman. Where there's a lot of conversation, was it going to be him or Peyton Manning? And I think for him to do that against Ohio State, that was his Desmond Howard moment. At home, doing it everywhere. He caught a touchdown. Every way he could impact the game, he did.
I remember watching the Heisman broadcast that year, and it was just in shock. Amazingly, so our number 2, I cheated for my number 2.
Okay.
I comboed, and this was just a moment. I comboed Desmond Howard's punt return and Charles Woodson's punt return.
Okay.
Not just the days, notwithstanding that Woodson had, that the punt return clinched it, and that was, and it might have clinched the Heisman as well. Just the symbioticness, like they both ran down the same sideline. There were so many parallels. And when Woodson was interviewed after, they like, why didn't you do the pose? It's like, I couldn't. I got tackled by my teammates.
Yeah, they dogpiled him in the back corner of the end zone.
He thought about it, which I think is kind of nice, because I think it would have been a little cheesy if he did it as well, which made the Heisman win a little better, I think. With Howard,
Howard
it's
was
nice having Howard be the only one.
Yeah, Howard won by a huge margin. Just because Woodson was primarily a defensive player, people even going into the ceremony were like, it's going to be Peyton Manning.
Obviously, but
yeah,
those 2 punt returns I put together as moments, and seeing as you haven't mentioned my number 1, I would not be surprised if we have the same number 1.
Timmy Biakabatuka.
313 in 96. Yeah.
95.
95.
Yeah.
I'm looking at 313 on the ground in a game that another game we were not supposed to win.
Yeah, it's another one like 93 where Ohio State comes in undefeated. They've got Eddie George, who went on to win the Heisman, Orlando Pace, a number 1 draft pick, and just studs all over the field. Did they still have Terry Glenn at that point, or David Boston?
Well, David Boston, I remember, was he was in the big scuffle with Charles Woodson, I think.
Yeah.
So it might not have been him, unless he was like super young.
Because I remember Terry Glenn, because then he got drafted by the Bill Parcells Patriots. So Glenn might have been gone by that point, but they were loaded with players all over the field. And it was clearly, it felt like it was going to be Ohio State's coronation, and Duca was like,
Terry Glenn was their big guy, and then 2 guys that not exactly the biggest names. That wide receiver, Buster Tillman, Ricky Dudley. Demetrius Stanley. Ricky Dudley was the tight end. Went on to the NFL. But that was Eddie George's big year, 1,900 yards, and Bobby Hoying at quarterback. But
future Eagle, Bobby Hoying.
But future Carolina Panther, Chimanga Biakabatuka. Michigan lore forever, that one game. And I think that was the game. I want to think that was the game where Ohio had the ball, and they drove down a couple times, but they couldn't put the ball in the end zone, and they went up 9-0 on 3 field goals, and then a slant pass got Michigan to 9-7. Like all of a sudden, it was a game, or that might have been the '96 game that I'm thinking of. But yeah, 300 on the ground in any game is massive. The rivalry game, it's a bigger deal. That's a good list, I think, for both of us. I had one other as I was thinking about it. It was really cool to win the 100th game ever.
Yeah.
And that was there were two high. That was a number 4 versus number 5 game, and Chris Perry scored a touchdown in the 4th to seal it because Michigan had gone up early, but then Ohio started chipping away. And the big game, the 1 versus 2 game where Sean Crable just had a really stupid penalty late, and it helped allow Ohio State to come back and win that one. It's a rivalry where, if you're a 1-2 or a 4-5, it's a massive game. But if it's this year, it's still a big game. So good list, man.
Yeah, good looking back. I missed the night.
I do too. For other reasons, it's tough being a grown up, but we're at a weird phase of the show here because you said you have a Mr. Smarty Pants. I have one Mr. Smarty Pants for you. I didn't make a list because you said you had one.
Yes.
So before you do yours, I'm going to do mine, and because we're staying with the game theme here.
Okay.
Ohio brings the number 1 rated defense into this game, and I was curious if you know the last time either team won this game and they didn't have more rushing yards than the opponent. I wouldn't know.
I definitely don't know off the top of my head. Yeah, I don't know. I would just be blindly guessing.
Blindly guess. We'll see how close you get. Give me a year.
The last time the winning team had fewer rushing yards
than the other, yeah.
I'll
tell you, Ohio outrushed Michigan 149-88. So Michigan won this game,
right?
And we had a future third baseman at quarterback.
Okay, I'll take 2000.
2000. Drew Henson threw for more than 300 yards. Ohio outrushed Michigan. They outgained Michigan. Somehow Michigan beat them in time of possession. 3 Wolverine interceptions helped the cause. So I'm kind of hoping we win the turnover battle today and we win the time of possession battle today.
Was that who was Craig Krenzel, the Ohio State quarterback? Do we know?
It's a good question. We get my producer in my ear. He's looking it up right now.
And shout out to our support staff.
Jonathan Wells was the leading rusher for Ohio State. No, we need the Ohio State quarterback. Steve Belsar. You're right.
Oh, okay. Oh, Krenzel would have been like when they beat like 2 years later. So okay.
There you go. What do you got for me? I'm not Mr. Smarty Pants, so that's getting off the screen.
So Sunday, as I was watching the Eagles and the Rams, I had a friend who reached out to me to ask if I thought Matthew Stafford was going to go to the Hall of Fame or not, which is an interesting debate, but that's not where it goes. Obviously, Stafford was a number 1 overall draft pick. There have been 10 players since the AFL-NFL merger to be drafted number 1 overall and go on to a Hall of Fame induction as a player. How many do you think you can name?
Oh my goodness. John Elway.
A few of them have been mentioned already and Elway is one of them. That's one.
John Elway. Is Jake Long in the Hall of Fame?
Not yet.
Not yet. I know he went number 1 overall. Oh my goodness. Oh geez, Peyton Manning.
Yes. There's at least two other people we've mentioned today.
Oh, geez.
So you've got Elway and Manning.
Juan Soto wasn't ranked. He wasn't drafted number 1.
No.
Let's go back in my memory of who we talked about today. Orlando Pace.
Yep, he's one of them in '97, number 1 pick.
So I got 3.
Yep.
If I say Peyton Manning again, does that count as 4?
No, but I'll tell you, Eli Manning's probably going to go. So he'll make it 11.
Yeah, but he's not there yet, though. So
right.
Yeah, Eli would be a.
I'll tell you the one other one who has been brought up, but is not a Michigan or Ohio State guy. He's a USC guy, but we did mention O.J. Simpson, I believe.
Oh, OJ.
Yeah, OJ was a number 1 pick who went on to the Hall of Fame. Yeah, we mentioned OJ when we were talking about Saquon.
Gotcha. OJ's a little before my time of following the draft, so.
Well, would you like me to give you the list?
Oh, well, give me a team.
Okay.
That might help.
So, 3 guys were number 1 picks in the '80s who went on to Hall of Fame careers. You got Elway. One of them played for Buffalo.
Was Bruce Smith a number 1 overall pick?
Bruce Smith was a number 1 overall pick.
Okay.
And one of them played for Dallas.
Aikman.
Okay. Then we have 3 of them in the '70s. One is currently on the Fox pregame show.
Is it Howie Long?
No, Howie Long.
He's the only one I know on the Fox pregame show. I don't watch pregame shows.
It's Terry Bradshaw.
Okay, that's fair.
One of them played at Texas. Earl Campbell.
Okay.
And one of them was drafted by Tampa Bay and led them to the NFC Championship game in '79.
Number 1 overall pick for Tampa Bay.
Who went to the Hall of Fame.
For some reason, I'm stuck on Warren Sapp and Vinny Testaverde, and neither one of them went number 1 overall, especially in the '70s.
Testaverde went 1 overall.
Really?
Yeah, in '86, '87.
Okay.
Leroy Selman.
Okay, I wasn't pulling Leroy Selman out.
And then the 2 in the '60s were O.J. Simpson and offensive lineman Ron Yary.
Oh, Ron. Yeah, if I pulled out Ron Yary, I'm definitely looking that up on the internet. Forget that. All right, I didn't do terrible. I got 3 on my own and got 4 more with some help. That's
not bad.
Giving myself a little bit for that. I'm okay with that.
We are 12 minutes to kick off.
Yeah, so we have just enough time now for a quick rank roulette for you. Last week we talked about our favorite Thanksgiving things, and my number 1 thing was the day after Thanksgiving leftover sandwich. So I thought it would be cool to have you blindly rank sandwiches.
Okay.
So
I love a good sandwich.
You give me a letter and you give me a number for it. A, B, C, D, E.
D.
D is the Reuben.
Oh boy, I love a good Reuben. I'm putting the Reuben 2.
2. That would have been my number 5 easily. I'm not a big Reuben guy, but there we go. D is gone.
C.
C is the ham and cheese.
I'm not a big ham guy. 5.
Okay. Boom, done.
I'll go
A, B,
E. I'll go A.
A is tuna fish.
I like tuna fish, but it's not a top 3, so I'm gonna put it 4. I like it more than ham and cheese, though. I like the way this is shaken out so far.
All right, so you got B and E.
I'll go E.
E is egg salad.
Oh, egg salad would have been my 5. I have to make that 3.
Ooh, yeah, that's so your de facto number one sandwich. It's not the Tim Hare special, the 2 slices of cheese and 2
Right.
pieces of bread. It's roast beef.
So roast beef would be my 1 or 2. If I hadn't been doing this blind, I probably would have gone Reuben 1, roast beef 2, tuna 3, ham and cheese 4, egg salad 5.
Wow. Okay. I would put Reuben 5. I'm a big ham and cheese guy. I love ham and cheese. That
That
would
was
be
like your
number one.
go-to.
Looking.
For school lunches, you were always eating ham and cheese. And those things were packed.
I might have gone tuna fish too, believe it or not. If you put cheese on it, like I like tuna melts.
I make really good tuna where I use wasabi paste to give it a little kick.
There you go. So if you're into sandwiches and you're on the TikTok, check out Adventures in Ardia. He does roll for sandwich. Absolutely, it's riveting stuff. It really is. He gets a die and he rolls for stuff: bread, main, veggies, and sauce and wild stuff. So it was mostly like the idea for this because he comes up with some weird combinations. The stuff we threw at you was more basic.
I spent a good portion of yesterday when I wasn't watching the Colorado game or Kansas City versus the Raiders. I was watching a lot of like fried turkey fail videos on TikTok where people like burn down their house or suffer horrific
fires. And oh boy, I saw one video where the guy did it right. And I just like you, I saw 1,000 videos of people basically, calling their insurance company saying I burned my house down.
And
I could never try that.
I'm not, I don't want you to think I'm wading into political waters here, but I did see one of RFK Jr. where he deep fried his in beef tallow. And then when he took it out of the hot oil, he was doing it barefoot. So then, like, if you drop any hot oil, you're suffering burns on your feet.
As someone who's worked in a kitchen around fryers, like I was a short order cook. I worked at Wendy's for a cup of coffee, but when I worked at Tabato's as a short order cook, putting anything in the fryer often resulted in pops.
Right.
And I caught hot oil in like the tear duct of my eye. I can't tell you how bad. It was just like a speck. Just I can't tell you how much that hurt. To get like a splash on something, that does significant damage. Like that's just, you got to be smart around hot oil in any capacity. But like the video I saw when somebody put the turkey in, it overflowed. Like they didn't check their levels and the hot oil went on the burner below and it just exploded. It was like a bomb.
The one I saw was he'd overfilled it with oil. So then, like, as he's slowly putting the turkey in, then he had like a cup there that he was like trying to take oil out, like bubbling oil out with one hand while he's dipping the turkey in with the other. And I was just like, oh my God, there are 8 different ways this guy might get injured. I'm rooting for 3, 6, and 7.
We could make a list of the dumbest ways to hurt yourself. I think Thanksgiving fried turkey would be a close number 2 to some idiot blowing his finger off on the 4th of July.
Yeah, the Jason Pierre-Paul special.
Today's the last day that somebody's going to have all 10 of their fingers. Yeah. Well, Thursday was the last day that somebody, I don't know, had their porch. Wow. Those are interesting videos to watch. You know what we watched last night with my father-in-law? We went back to their house for dessert. 5 minutes to kick off here. He got into watching like these animal specials. And if you've ever seen the Komodo dragon stalking its prey, Komodo dragons are massive and they're scary looking. They look like some of the evil lizard creatures from Zelda 2: A Link to the Past. The Komodo dragon attacking like this giant aardvark. And this giant animal was like it got bit or something, and like the paralytic in the venom, like it couldn't move. And then the lizard was like just looking at it for like an hour. Like, I'm not hungry yet, but you're not going anywhere.
So that's what you do after dinner? You watch nature devour each other?
That it was after the 6-hour dinner. Yeah,
You should have watched those as you were waiting for the food.
we had time.
Yeah.
It felt like we were the Komodo dragon sitting staring at my brother-in-law while he was eating, and we weren't yet.
What's more uncomfortable? Your food comes and no one else's does, so everyone's watching you eat, or the thing you had where you've been asleep and everyone's looking at you as you wake up?
Oh, the food.
I
The
think
food,
so.
absolutely. Because I mean, so my brother, like, we told him, like, his mom was like, "Eat, eat, it's okay," and he's like, "No, no, I'm fine, I'm fine." Like, you're trying to be polite and wait for everybody, but
And it's pizza. It's
and he had a slice here and there, and the restaurant was cold. Like, it was very cold. So like so my niece got her food, she got these French fries in a metal cup. Like they put a liner in there, and then the fries are in there. Like later in the meal, like I'm shivering. I tell her, I said, "Give me your French fries." So I took I said, "You can have the fries." I'm taking the metal cup, and like I have a candle, so I'll use this. I'm like, I'm just gonna hold it like this because I'm warming my hands. Like I put it on my neck. And Jen's looking at me like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "This thing's warm. I'm freezing."
right.
But I get cold I get cold in the summer. Like it's 80 degrees outside. I'm like, man, I wish it was 95. This breeze is kind of chilly. I'm officially old.
I mean, look at me. I'm in an old man sweater in my home because I'm always. It's my thyroid. I'm either freezing or I'm burning up. All right, we've got 4 minutes to kick off. I think I'm going to order some Chinese food.
I have some more leftovers to eat, so I'm going there. Good show today. We got it in. I mean, I kind of we lost track of time with the holiday and such, but we got it in. Good show, and hopefully, in a couple hours, we're not sending angry texts at each other. Like, what are they doing? If they lose 42-14, they lose 42-14. What can you do? But if they lose 16-13 because they did something stupid,
I'll tell you, if they lose 16-13, I'll take that as a moral victory.
and any which way you turn it, whether they lose by 30 or they lose by 3, yeah, we're not expected to win, so we can't lose. So it's good talking to you, Tim.
Yeah.
He's Tim, I'm Max, and thanks you for making us part of your game morning. We'll see you back here